Welcome to the Alpine Seed stage of AGORA European Green Deal. We are at 2,334 meters above sea level in Innsbruck, Austria, and it is snowing outside while we host part 3 of our celebration on soil, seeds and senses. This is a part of the first new European Bauhaus Festival, and we will unlock the potential of old wisdom for our future lives and lifestyles. Here of a 100-year-old seed bank of mud houses and citizen biotopes. It is my great pleasure to welcome biologists Stefanie, Pontasch and Thomas Peham, landscape architect Claudia Sacher and architect and earthen architect Heringer. Thank you for being with us today. Let me start with Stefanie. You are a biologist and farmer yourself and also an expert on biodiversity. You work with municipalities, companies, scientists and citizens to re-nature, develop and monitor species-rich meadows and wildflower areas, sometimes just a couple of square meters of a parking lot, for instance, or of a street island. How do people react when you invite them to transform their own environment together with you?
Yes, so I care for wildflowers and I care for wildflower spaces. And we do this together with, we engage municipalities and companies and citizens to act together and foster, increase biodiversity next to our doorsteps. It is one of my objectives to get people closer to nature, to make them wonder about life. When we think about meadows and we think about it now, it might be a bit hard, but we have vibrant places full of life, colorful, vibrant due to the sound of insects, humming bees. So getting people to observation, to get in contact with these fields, get them to observe animals and wildflowers, kind of creates a connection, and that makes the wonder about life. So it is important, or it is for me important, that we act together, scientists, citizens, as well as municipalities, personnel of communities, and that kind of takes us to the next step, which is the creation of biotopes together, near natural spaces together, citizen biotopes that are these places full of life and right in front of our doorsteps.
Citizen biotopes, you envision hundreds of them, not just in the Alpine area here, but also in all of Europe. How could these look like?
Citizen biotopes are just what I imagine like full places full of life and vibrant. They're co-created and they're close so you can experience them. So they're right in front of our doorsteps. They're next to the street corners or our parking lots. So we observe together and we tender to these places together. And by taking care, we see how these places develop and we can experience how they become hotspots of biodiversity. So I believe that the strongest learning experience occurs and happens when we discover biodiversity for ourselves. And this is what's happening in citizen biotopes.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you say there's a lot of urban gardening, but we also have to do these things in rural Europe and in peripheral areas. There's one other aspect. You say that there is very little knowledge today of how to harvest the seeds from wildflowers, and that this knowledge has to be revived in order to serve our future.
You're talking about rural areas, and that's where farming occurs, and farming activity and human activity on and land use has been the activity that once created diversity of life, diversity of landscapes. So it's about over the last decades, this knowledge got more and more lost. So now we're talking about and experiencing green and bland landscapes, grasslands, poor of life. So it is important to get this traditional knowledge and kind of wisdom back into our consciousness, back into action to actually foster biodiversity, because it's this traditional landscaping routine that is creating biodiversity, fostering biodiversity.
Thank you, Stefanie. So all square meters, every square meter is what counts now, indeed. I mean, as the connection to food security is unfortunately in sharp focus today when we look at our geopolitical dynamics. And the slogan, think globally and act locally, gets a whole new meaning as we brace for a terrible food shortage in many countries of the world. We understand that 95% of the worldwide calorie intake is coming from the soil. Now, Thomas Peham, you oversee a hidden local treasure here in Tyrol, the finest hour of which might still be ahead of us, because we are talking about a 100-year-old genetic seed bank, which besides the one in St. Petersburg is one of the 2 world's oldest seed banks in the world. What can this treasure do for us and for future generations, but also for other places in the world?
First, I think we have to look at how this diversity arose. The advantage was that the producer and the breeder was at the same time the consumer. So the people chose the varieties they had preference to in type of color, for example, like this millet, which has an untypical reddish brownish color, which was attractive to the breeders. Or they liked the taste of specific varieties. And then they cultivated it further and further. And because of this variety of the breeders and their, let's say, the prevalences to different cultivars, and this in reliance to the soil, the local soil, and the local climatic conditions, allowed to boost the diversity of agricultural cultivars. And we have a quite huge diversity, for example, here in Tyrol, as our gene bank keeps around 1,000 different seed samples. These samples belong to about 35 different plant species. As you can see here, there are several cereals, wheat, rye, but also not cereals like the popper, and in the gene bank we have a variety of beans, for example, but also cabbage, and really all the products people need to produce for their same for their food.
So you brought us things that are, some of them are 60 years old, right?
Yes, some of the samples are out of a collection, so because you once gather them and collect them, but in a gene bank it's necessary to regularly cultivate them again to keep up the germination rate high, so that the really seeds there can germinate and produce new seedlings and new fruits. So it's necessary to grow them, and with every growing time there is the risk to change the shape of the collection. Therefore, it's good to have a sample from the first collection or one of the first collections, to always compare it with the recent growing season, that to really collect and breed further the ones as it was collected before.
And that's also interesting. You test and trial some of these old varieties in our real time here in the Tyrolean market, right?
Exactly, because it's not only the success of our ancestors that you have this variety, because there's a strong view to the future. Because within these collections, there are a lot of hidden characteristics, agronomic characteristics. There can be some robustness against plant diseases, for example, or, for example, the resistance to change climatic conditions. And all this variety and characteristics are still inside this collection and can be raised and taken for the situation when we need them. To find them, we have some research project, for example, together with the University of Innsbruck. And we need local cooperation partners like farmers and food processors to bring them back to the market.
And could you use these samples also in other countries of the world?
You could, but the aim would be that collections are done in these countries because they have their own varieties and their own diversity. And the idea is to bring them the knowledge and the resources to grow their own and build up their own seed banks and going further with their collections.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's so fascinating. What a hidden treasure here in Tyrol, a 100-year-old seed bank. Thank you, Thomas. Now we continue with the link between local action and global thinking. Claudia Sacher, a week ago, you opened the global field, a 2,000 square meter field here in Innsbruck. It exhibits the most important arable crops of the entire world and is part of a rapidly growing global initiative to raise awareness on resource justice. What is the idea behind this movement?
The idea is that if we divide the global surface of arable land by the number of all persons living on Earth, we get about these 2,000 square meters, and we want to show what has to grow on this field. We need to grow food, we need to grow feed, we need to grow renewables, but we don't know about that all. So we started this educational field, part of this global network, which was started in Berlin, to invite everyone to come to the field, to have a look on the crops and to get in touch with the crops we even don't know we use them. And to get in a discussion or in this thinking about what is the finite resource soil and what are my needs and my personal consumption. So the big idea is that being on the field, seeing all the crops is the start of a search of an individual solution, what we can change or how everybody can change the personal life, the routine a little bit, that all the needs and wishes they fit on these 2,000 square meters.
So tell us, what does this field look like?
This field is parted in about 9 areas, and every area is one big culture. Like we have the pulses, we have the cereals, and within this one group we try to show the most important crops worldwide. So we don't show every crop, we show the most important, like the ones which were cultivated on the biggest areas. And you can just walk in, pass by and have a look on the plants growing there, have a look on them, how they proceed. And you also get some information about the real areas where they are cultivated worldwide. So they are not cultivated all in Tyrol. Yeah, that's it.
So you bring schools or citizens to the field in the future? What's the idea of the global field?
The idea is that everybody can pass by, but besides that, we also bring a lot of groups there. Not only schools, we also have the interaction with the university, and we also started already excursions with adults, because it's not just a topic for youngsters, it's also about everybody who's eating every day, who needs food every day, and that's everybody.
Claudia, how many global fields are there worldwide by now?
Actually, I don't know, because I heard about 10 to 15, but they are growing rapidly right now. I heard about 3 to 4 which were started this year in Germany, 2 in Austria, like 3 in South Tyrol. It feels like it's a big movement right now that a lot of persons try to cultivate these global fields to invite the persons to get in touch with them.
And what was new to me is that the idea of this movement is coming from the World Agriculture Report, which also recommends to keep the agriculture of the world in the smallest possible structures, but also to make sure that worldwide we have to go organic better sooner than later.
Yeah, that's right. that it was the start of the global field. It was the start to bring this report on the field, to get in touch with it, write directly on ground and not only on the paper.
Well, thank you, Claudia. So this means many of us know the IPCC report, but we are yet to learn about the agricultural report and the global field movement, which is currently gaining momentum across the planet. Well, soil, of course, is not just a provider of life on the surface, but also if we dig deeper. And it is my great honor and pleasure to welcome Anna Heringer today. You are a prize-winning architect and an honorary professor of the UNESCO Chair of Earthen Architecture, Constructive Cultures and Sustainable Development. You say that soils from Sweden to Spain provide us with mud, the recyclable housing material of tomorrow. Why on earth should we build mud houses? And is that realistic?
I love this question because, in fact, 3 billion people are living in all climate zones right now in mud houses. It's just not on our radar because we are so focused in inventing the latest, newest, most sustainable, greenest building material, while we forget that this was invented long time ago by nature itself, and it's just right under our feet. Whenever we dig a foundation, an underground parking, or a new subway, you know, this is all fantastic building materials. And instead of dumping it on landfills and even paying for that, we just should use it to build our houses in future. And that has been the past and the wisdoms from the past. It was built also across Europe in all climate zones. So why don't we do this now with all the tools and technologies that we have in our hands? Of course it's realistic. And
you are not just talking the talk, but also walking the walk.
Yeah, I love building with mud. It's the most beautiful material to work with. And it's also, it's the only material you can take from the ground. You can recycle or use it just as it is in the raw form without adding any stabilizers and so on for all sorts of walls, also load-bearing multi-story buildings. And you can reuse it, recycle it as often as you want without any loss of quality and return it back to the ground it came from and plant a garden on top of it. So for me, it's really the champion of sustainable construction materials.
So you say, especially here in Europe, we are to wake up again and uncover this old wisdom of using mud and clay as our housing material of the future?
Yes, I mean, we always think, this is something of an African country or far away in Bangladesh, where I'm also building. But no, we have our building tradition too. The Alhambra, for example, was built largely in rammed earth. So what was possible that long ago should be possible today as well.
Mm-hmm. And where have you been building these houses, in Germany or in Austria, for instance?
In Vorarlberg, there are a lot of examples of great earthen structures, also by my colleague Martin Rauch, but also in Switzerland there are a lot, in Germany. And I'm currently also constructing a large structure in Bavaria.
And you won a new European Bauhaus Prize for a...
Yes, for a building in Rosenheim, where we also used a combination out of timber and earth, mm-hmm. which is also very important, not just to focus on one thing, but to do good combinations. So timber is of course also, but it's growing out of the soil. So this is why it's so precious. And also, of course, the fibers for all sorts of insulations.
Now, conventional wisdom has it that a mud house might be sort of cold and maybe even somehow not dry.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. We think this is melting away in the first rain that comes. No, they are really extremely strong. You just have to consider a good boots, really a good foundation, mm-hmm. and a good top, a good roof, that it's not, raining from the top. But, we have hundreds of years old buildings in Europe that are standing strong.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for your amazing projects, all of which are promising approaches on the solution side of the green transition. It's Stefanie Pontasch with the Citizen Biotopes who had to leave us a bit early today, Thomas Peham with Tyrol's Seedbank, which is 100 years old, Claudia Sacher with the global field that is now open also in Innsbruck, Austria, and Anna Heringer with Earthen Architecture. This was part 3 of the celebration of soil, seeds and senses, brought to you by AGORA, European Green Deal. Follow us on YouTube and press the notification button to get updated about our work.